In 1973, America nearly lost control of the Mississippi River. If that river had broken free, Louisiana's economy could have collapsed almost overnight. That was the moment Louisiana's real weakness became impossible to ignore. On paper, Louisiana should be one of the most powerful states in America. It sits at the mouth of the Mississippi River, the single most important economic artery in North America. It is the exit point for the American interior, the place where the wealth of a continent flows into the sea. This should be the New York of the South. Instead, Louisiana is sinking, its population is shrinking, its growth is weak, and the very river that made it valuable is trying to leave. Louisiana won the map, but it lost the ground beneath it. The state's power began with one thing: the Mississippi. For thousands of years, the river carried mud, clay, sand, and silt down from the center of North America. When it reached the Gulf, it slowed down and dropped that sediment. Layer by layer, that material built the delta. It built the wetlands. It built the coast. It built much of southern Louisiana itself. That was the cause of Louisiana's advantage. It was also the cause of its weakness, because this was not hard land. It was not ancient stone. It was not stable ground pushed upward by tectonic force. It was river-made land, loose land, wet land, fragile land, the kind that compresses, the kind that sinks. Historically, the river solved that problem on its own. Every flood spread fresh sediment across the delta plain. The land sank a little. The river rebuilt it. It was dangerous. It was messy. But it worked. Then came the conflict. People wanted control. They wanted predictable shipping. They wanted cities that could expand. They wanted ports, levees, neighborhoods, roads, and permanent settlement. So they blocked the floods. They pinned the river into place. They shut down the very process that had created the land in the first place. The consequence was brutal. The sediment stopped spreading. The rebuilding stopped. The sinking did not. Louisiana kept dropping, but the river was no longer allowed to save it. That is why southern Louisiana feels so strange on a map. In most places, the line between land and sea looks fixed. In Louisiana, it looks temporary. Marshes blur into open water. Bayous twist through wetlands. Swamps, ridges, and channels break up the coast into something that feels half-built. It is not a coastline in the normal sense. It is a transition zone, a compromise between land and water. That gave Louisiana protection. It also gave it permanent instability. The marshes could soften storm surge. The swamps could slow movement. The wetlands could absorb energy from the Gulf. But the same landscape also made it hard to build, hard to defend, hard to drain, and hard to expand safely. The state had natural barriers, but it did not have solid foundations. That was the next conflict. Louisiana needed major cities to exploit its position, but its best location sat on terrible ground. New Orleans was the perfect example. It occupied one of the most valuable positions on the continent. It sat near the lower Mississippi, close to the Gulf, tied into the river system that connected the interior to global trade. On the map, it was brilliant. On the ground, it was a nightmare. Flooding, disease, heat, mosquitoes, swamp, water just below the surface. To grow, the city had to drain wetlands. But draining wetlands made the land sink faster. So New Orleans expanded by weakening itself. It created more room. It created more risk. That is the consequence you still see today. Much of the city sits below sea level, in a bowl, dependent on levees and pumps simply to remain habitable. Louisiana had the right location, but from the beginning, every attempt to cash in on that location made the physical problem worse. And then, the biggest problem of all arrived. The Mississippi did not want to stay. This is the core of Louisiana's story. The river that created the state is also the river that now threatens it. Rivers are not fixed pipes. They are moving systems. As a delta grows, the path to the sea gets longer, the slope gets flatter, sediment builds up, the route becomes less efficient. Over time, the river starts looking for a shorter path, a steeper path, a better deal. That is exactly what the Mississippi has done many times before. Over thousands of years, it has shifted across the Louisiana coast, abandoning old mouths and building new ones. It made Louisiana by moving. It survived by changing course. Now comes the conflict. The river's preferred path is no longer the one that runs past Baton Rouge and New Orleans. It wants to shift west into the Atchafalaya system. That route is shorter, it is steeper, it is better from the river's point of view. And if the river gets what it wants, Louisiana loses what made it matter. That is the consequence. Baton Rouge loses strategic leverage. New Orleans loses control of the main river outlet. Ports weaken. Industry gets stranded. Saltwater intrusion gets worse. The lower Mississippi economy fractures. Louisiana does not just face a flood, it faces a rewiring of its entire geographic purpose. That is why the 1973 crisis mattered so much. It was not just a flood story, it was a warning. America came close to learning that its most important river was no longer interested in obeying the map humans had drawn around it. And that is where the real system appears. Louisiana is not just fighting nature, it is trapped inside a national machine. The Mississippi Basin drains 31 states. But what moves through that system is not just water. Grain moves through it, coal moves through it, fuel moves through it. Steel, chemicals, fertilizer, machinery, and industrial cargo move through it. The products of farms, mines, factories, and cities all lean south. And where do they end up? Louisiana. That makes Louisiana more than a state. It makes it a valve, a gateway, a choke point, a place the wider economy depends on whether Louisiana itself benefits enough or not. That is why the United States stepped in. The federal government did not build the old river control structure because it loved Louisiana's natural geography. It built it because the American economy needs an unnatural geography. The system's job is simple. Keep the Mississippi flowing where commerce needs it to flow. Keep the river from fully diverting into the Atchafalaya. Hold the map together by force. That is the hidden conflict. Nature wants efficiency. The economy wants continuity. And the consequence is permanent intervention. Gates, levees, pumps, dredging, flood control, constant maintenance, constant risk. Louisiana is not stable because it is naturally secure. It is stable because engineering keeps forcing stability onto a place that keeps trying to come apart. Once you see that, Louisiana's whole history becomes clearer. Long before the United States existed, this region already mattered. Indigenous societies used these rivers as transportation routes, trade arteries, and cultural connectors. This was not empty swamp waiting for civilization. It was inhabited, navigated, and strategically understood. Poverty Point alone shows that organized societies recognized the value of this region thousands of years ago. Then came the empires. The French saw the same thing later Americans would see. Control the mouth of the Mississippi, and you influence the interior of the continent. That was the cause of French interest. Louisiana was not mainly about comfort, it was about leverage. The conflict was obvious. Whoever controlled the lower river could shape trade, power, and access across a vast part of North America. The consequence was New Orleans. The city was founded because the map demanded a city there, not because the terrain was kind, not because life was easy, not because the ground was safe. It was founded because whoever wanted to control the river system needed a foothold at the bottom of it. Again, the same pattern. Good position, bad foundation. And still, the location was too valuable to abandon. That is one of the deepest rules in geography. People will tolerate incredible hardship if a place controls enough money, trade, or power. That is why New Orleans survived. Commerce kept it alive. Empire kept it alive. Forced labor kept it alive. The lower Mississippi was too valuable for the settlement to fail, even when the environment itself seemed to reject it. Control of Louisiana passed from France to Spain, then back again, then eventually to the United States. The names changed, the logic did not. The lower river mattered too much. The Louisiana Purchase is usually remembered as a giant land deal, but the real prize was control. Jefferson wanted access to New Orleans because without that access, the young United States would remain constrained. A continental country without control of its main internal outlet would always be strategically incomplete. That was the cause. The conflict was between a growing republic and the possibility of being economically boxed in. The consequence was huge. The United States secured the mouth of the Mississippi, and with it, the future of its interior expansion. For a while, that looked like the beginning of Louisiana's rise. In the 19th century, New Orleans became one of the wealthiest cities in America. Cotton moved through it, sugar moved through it, river trade moved through it, money accumulated there, banks grew there. The city became a key commercial center for the lower Mississippi world. This should have been Louisiana's great breakthrough, but the conflict was already built into the model. The wealth passing through Louisiana was not the same as broad, durable power settling in Louisiana. The state was rich in throughput. It was weaker in transformation. The economy depended heavily on slavery, plantation extraction, and commodity movement rather than on a broad base of resilient industries. That was the cause of the next collapse. The conflict arrived in the Civil War. The Union understood exactly what New Orleans meant. Capturing the city meant choking one of the Confederacy's main economic arteries. That was not symbolic, that was strategic. And the consequence after the war was devastating. The old wealth structure shattered, slavery ended, the plantation system broke. Louisiana remained important, but it did not transition cleanly into the kind of diversified industrial powerhouse that might have matched its geography. It fell instead into a weaker pattern: poverty, violence, repression, and institutional fragility. That is why Louisiana's story is not just about natural disadvantage. It is about repeated failure to turn strategic value into durable strength. Compare New Orleans to Chicago. Chicago sat on stable ground, linked transport systems, and expanded into an industrial giant. Compare it to New York. New York combined location with finance, immigration, institutions, and scale. Compare it to Houston. Houston turned Gulf access and energy into expansion on more forgiving terrain. Louisiana had the map. It kept losing the conversion. That is the conflict. It could move wealth. It struggled to hold wealth. It could dominate a route. It struggled to become the place where the safest capital and the most powerful firms permanently concentrated. The consequence was a ceiling. New Orleans remained important. It did not become what its map position promised. Politics made that trap worse. A hard geography can still produce success if institutions are strong, but Louisiana's political system often worked against that possibility. Patronage, corruption, insider networks, short-term deals, machine politics. The state became known not just for power, but for transactional power. Huey Long is the most famous symbol of this. He built roads, schools, bridges, and hospitals. He expanded services. He challenged elites. That made him powerful, but there was a second side to it. He also normalized concentrated personal power. He strengthened the state in visible ways while deepening a culture that often treated institutions as tools of political control rather than as neutral systems of long-term trust. That was the cause of a deeper problem. The conflict was between visible progress and healthy governance, and the consequence lasted beyond his life. Louisiana's reputation became harder for long-term investors to trust. Businesses deciding where to build major value do not just look at location. They look at rules, predictability, permits, competence. Whether power is institutional or personal, strategic geography can bring trade to your doorstep. It does not automatically create trust. Without trust, broad diversification becomes harder. Then came oil, and for a moment it looked like Louisiana had found its escape. Offshore reserves, refineries, pipelines, petrochemicals, export terminals. Louisiana became central to the American energy system. On an energy map, it is one of the most important places in the country. That was the cause of new wealth, but oil created a new conflict. Easy money narrows urgency. When a state can rely on a highly profitable resource, it often delays the harder work of diversification, educational upgrading, institutional reform, and economic renewal. The resource starts carrying too much weight. Politics starts orbiting around it. Other sectors weaken. That is the resource curse. And the consequence in Louisiana was familiar. The state became richer in a narrow sense and weaker in a broader one. The energy corridor expanded. The petrochemical belt grew. Jobs came. Output came. National importance increased. So did pollution. So did dependency. The stretch between Baton Rouge and New Orleans became one of the densest petrochemical zones. In America, the country benefited from the energy and industrial output. Louisiana absorbed the health fears, the environmental damage, and the reputational cost. That changed the human side of the story, because now states do not only compete with ports, railroads, and factories. They compete for people, especially educated people, ambitious people, the kind of people who start firms, build new sectors, and make an economy less dependent on one old engine. That is the cause of Louisiana's brain drain. The conflict is simple and painful. The state trains people. Then many of them leave. They head for Houston, Atlanta, Dallas, other places with stronger labor markets, cleaner reputations, or better long-term prospects. And the consequence is self-reinforcing. Innovation weakens, confidence falls, the economy narrows further. The next generation sees even less reason to stay. That is how a strategically vital place can still feel stuck. Which brings us back to the present. Louisiana is now fighting on every front at once. It is fighting subsidence, fighting coastal erosion, fighting hurricanes, fighting institutional weakness, fighting slow growth, fighting talent loss, and still fighting the Mississippi River itself. That is the accumulated consequence of everything that came before. Every earlier solution produced a new vulnerability. Every advantage carried a hidden cost. Every attempt to force stability onto the landscape made the long-term tension sharper. Now, Louisiana lives inside permanent management. Levees must hold. Pumps must work. Channels must stay open. Gates must be maintained. Flood systems must be monitored. Coastal restoration must continue. The river must be contained. Other states get to imagine the future. Louisiana spends enormous energy preserving the present. That difference matters. And then there is the coast itself. The map is shrinking. Wetlands erode. Barrier protections weaken. Open water moves farther inland. Communities face retreat. Storm exposure rises. Infrastructure faces growing pressure. The cause is physical. The conflict is constant. The consequence is strategic. Because Louisiana is not just losing land, it is losing buffer. And buffer is what protects everything behind it. That is why this story matters far beyond one state. Louisiana shows that strategic importance does not guarantee prosperity. A place can sit on an extraordinary location and still fall behind. A place can move enormous wealth and still fail to keep enough of it. A place can become essential to the wider system and still carry most of the risk locally. That is the insight. Geography gives leverage. It does not promise victory. If institutions are weak, if the economy narrows, and if the environment itself is unstable, even one of the best locations on the map can become a trap. Louisiana channels trade for the interior. It processes energy for the country. It absorbs Gulf exposure. It protects a national logistical system. And yet, broad prosperity still leaks away. The trade moves through, the oil moves through, the strategic value remains, but the burden stays. And here is the twist. Louisiana did not struggle because it was unimportant. It struggled because it was too useful, too exposed, and too unstable at the same time. Too useful to the trade system, too useful to the energy system, too exposed to be abandoned, too unstable to become fully secure. It is built on land that wants to sink, tied to a river that wants to leave, and locked into a national economy that cannot let either of those things happen. That means Louisiana is not living in normal geography. It is living in forced geography, managed geography, emergency geography. And if that management ever fails, if the coast keeps shrinking fast enough, if the river ever breaks free, the consequences will not stop at Louisiana. The map of American power changes with it.